frame.
Okay, all right, turning on to more cheerful topics. Okay, so this month I wanted to take up lettering because I find that there is still a little shakiness when it comes to lettering, largely because there is really no training in how to make lettering look beautiful and appropriate for whatever artwork you are doing. So the lettering that you would probably do in a travel journal may not be the same that you might want to do on a card or an envelope. And there are certain rules that one has to understand when it comes to lettering. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a history and from that perspective, how to think of letters more as decorative shapes that, when put together, give us some meaning. I have shared those two documentaries yesterday, which hopefully y'all will watch. I watch them like they're going out of style. Anytime I get free time, I will sit and watch them because they are really, really rich in all sorts of data about lettering and writing. So, if you've seen them, then you will have a little bit of an idea of the evolution of letters. But I'll just go over some parts in case you haven't seen it. So, when we look at the Latin alphabet, which is the technical term for the alphabet used for European languages like English, French, German, the script is called Latin. Like many Indian languages, script is called Devanagari. So the script is different from language. You can have one kind of script and variations of the script for different languages. You could also have one script which could have a few extra letters for different languages to accommodate the different sounds that they use in different languages. So we have to keep them separate. We have to look at them as separate things. Now, when historically the need for language came about when the need for storing information became important. However, this information was only restricted to a short time period and for a small number of people. But as that grew, you needed something that had longevity. You also needed something that was readable by more people in different regions across languages. So, over the past 3,500 years, a few scratches on clay between neighboring farmers has gone and become the script with which the whole world understands each other, through which we record our histories, we write books, and all of that would have been impossible had we not had this kind of development. So, though it is not spoken about, the development of script was indeed a very, very important invention for the race. Now, having said all of this, it is understandable that in different regions you would have different kinds of symbols and different words to symbolize different objects, and then those would create a different kind of written language everywhere. That is why you have a script like the Chinese script, which is still very pictorial. Then you have Latin. You would also have had some scripts in South America, which are also very pictorial. And then you have Devanagari over here. So everywhere there are different languages. Some of them are just condensed pictures to depict something that becomes a pictorial language. And then there are languages which use what's called a rebus system. A rebus is when a symbol is created to represent a sound, and the sound comes from either this, usually the first sound of a particular word. So if I say the word boat, and the first sound is a B, and I create a boat shape, eventually the sound B is attached to the boat shape. So you no longer have to use the word boat. You know that this is a B sound. And you can play this game quite cutely, because if you make a to Z rebus like this. You can make a little symbol for apple, boat, cat, and then you write a sentence together and give it to kids or even between your friends. And you ask them, you give them a little table on which all the letters have been written corresponding to their symbols. And then they can use that rebus system to create read the sentence according to the letters they're assigned. So this is like a kind of a primitive code. So this is how we had language develop. So the reason I want you to think of language or development of language in its historic form is because today we are given this form of writing in a very formalized, very strict, disciplined manner. We are taught this is how A looks and this is how B looks. This is capital letters, small letters, and so on and so forth. But when you are doing lettering, if you restrict yourself to the rules and regulations that we are taught letters with today, you will miss out on the creative aspect of letters. That is why I want you to look at these as just mere shapes that are trying to communicate something. Sometimes they communicate words and thoughts, and sometimes they are just meant to look beautiful. If you can see them as two separate things like that, then you will be able to enjoy making letters for the sake of making a letter. If you want it to be readable, you will start compromising on the beauty of the letters in order to dumb it down to make it readable. So you need to understand the context of where you want those letters to appear, and only after that context is understood, you have to prioritize beauty over function or function over beauty, and then decide what letters you're going to make. So through the month, I want you to look at letters more from their aesthetic value than just their functional value. Functionally, we'll be able to make the letters. You know it, you've been doing it all your life, it's not going to be a problem. But the problem lies in how do we make them look beautiful. So to begin with, I will start off with the greatest script of all, and that, according to me, is the Roman script. Now, this is only related to the Latin scripts. As far as scripts in general are concerned, I think Devanagari is amazing and it has just not been appreciated enough. So just a little sidebar, I don't teach Devanagari because I have not practiced it much. But if you think about it, you don't need to learn spellings in Devanagari. You don't need to know capital letters, small letters. You can jumble up sentences and still the meaning of the sentence does not change. So it is a way more superior script and language combination than Latin. That is my official statement about Devanagari. But when it comes to Latin scripts, there is nothing better than the original Roman letters. And to think about it, these were invented maybe about 2,500 years ago. And we think about people from that time, how might they have written? They did not have as much technology as we have right now. But they came up with this kind of modular script, which they could practice and teach with a perfect matrix that anywhere across 2,500 kilometers, you went through the Roman Empire, you saw the exact same letters everywhere. So if you knew the script and if you understood a little bit of the language, you could read wherever you were. So that was one kind of unifying of people. And later on in 800 AD, which is about 1,500 years later, when Charlemagne united all of Europe, this was the one thing he said that will keep the continent united if we have one script for the language, learning from the Roman times. So there's a lot of history embedded in these letters as well, and I'm going to try and give you as much as I can. So first off, let's see how Roman letters are built into a matrix of a square. I'm going to show you how to draw all the letter forms in the square as the Romans made them. And then we are going to use that to create some words. So we are not going to use any fancy equipment today, just a pencil and a pen is going to do. And next week we might use some extra pens, which I will let you know by the end of class. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to ask all of you to write the alphabet A to Z, capital letters, in just a small block, the way you normally write them. And you can write them as beautifully as you can write them. I'm not going to say just write them casually, because I want you to see how these letters look according to the Roman script. In this, a few things will also be revealed about your lettering. Some of you might be writing an M and a W with a very small middle section. There is an M and W variation like this that is taught in schools. So I just want you to keep your current script in mind and then see how each of the letters looks different from the Roman letters. Okay, now we are going to start off with writing, making one square. Try to make the square as even and as perfect as possible. Now we know how to make this by just measuring with the pencil or with your finger. In this square, we will make a circle. As you can see, I'm making multiple circles. Somewhere in these multiple circles, there might be one perfect circle. And we will draw two lines across. So this is the basic shape that we are going to work with. Now in this shape, we are going to make three different types of letters. One is going to be a letter that uses up this entire square. Then we just draw a vertical line a little to the left of or at this junction for now. Yeah, just make it at this junction. It's a little on the outside of this junction, the junction between the circle and the cross. But we'll just make it over here for now. So this is our basic form. Now in this, we have letters that use up this entire space. This is 1. This is category 1. Then you have a category 2 that uses up the space in between. And then you have a category 3 which uses up just half of the square. So why are these proportions important? If you look at letters as aesthetic shapes, then like you would have compositions in art, you would also be able to create compositions in letters, even when you're just writing your own name or any other word with letters. And you want to make sure that the space used up by the letter, the space between the letters is all balanced. And that balance does not come unless you understand or you give your letter some kind of a grid to work with. So in this grid, now if you want, we can make a separate, three separate squares repeating the same shape in which we can write the letters. So this remains. You don't fiddle around with that. So in the first one, I'm just making a circle. In the second one, I'm making the circle and these lines on the side. And then the third one, I'm just making the half shape. So this is our 1, 2, and 3. Now these are the letters that we will create in the different shapes. Obviously, in the first category, the first letter is an O. The second letter is a Q, which is basically an O, and around this point you have a little tail coming out. This is the Q. Then you have a C, which extends only up to this point. A C which comes like this. The rest of it remains the same. Sorry, it can come straight also. Then you have a D, which will be just a vertical line here, horizontal line that comes and touches the circle at a tangent and then turns around on the same O. And then you have the G, which is essentially the C coming all the way till here and then going up and just stopping here, or you can take it inside here as well. So what are the letters we get? We got O, Q, C, G, D, and this is category 1. Now in category 2, let's make a line running through the center as well, vertical and horizontal. So first letter is the H. So some scribe has actually sat down and made an H in the square and an H in this shape and decided that this is prettier and easier to read in a long sentence rather than making it in a square. This is what I appreciate about Roman letters. Somebody showed up to work. They didn't just say, oh, you know what, just fit everything in a square. Whoever wants to read will read it. Whoever can't understand, forget it. So much attention given to minute details on aesthetics. Then we have the N, which perfectly cuts across the center and comes down. Then we have the A, then we have the opposite of A, which will be the V. It's such a lovely pattern gets created just in this. Then we have the U, which comes from the side, and you can see the circle, the part of the circle that it can follow to create a beautiful U shape, lovely balances. And then we have the Z, which is horizontal here, and a line running across. It's almost become like an emblem. So you have H, N, A, V, U, Z, and of course we can also have a T here. And if we look sharp, we also have a Y here. And I make my X in this proportion, but the X unfortunately is not here. And I don't know why, we won't get into that, but X is also a possibility. So I'm going to just put it in brackets. All right, now we have the last category. We might as well make this circle, I think. Okay, first, let's make the letter E. So E and F, B, if we have B, obviously we'll have a P. Now the R will also fit in here. Only thing is, we never make an R like this, like when we write over here. This is, the R and the K do not come like this. Actually, K might just come like that. So for the R, just shift the leg part a little to the right and make it parallel to this line that is going towards the southeast. Then in the same space we have an S, which will be a line that runs, we won't have a horizontal line over here, but you have a line that comes curved like this from the top and from the bottom, and it turns around somewhere like this. Now S is a very unusual shape in all the letters or all the scripts that you will learn. Now I and J are a little weird, so you can have the I in this space as well. And then you can have the J. I have made the J like this and I find that better. So it's at half the distance, but I turn it sideways a little more. Then you have a K, L, L will be here as well. And that leaves us with 5, 10, 15, 20, 22. We have to make some accommodation for M and W. These two are the wide letters in our system. So you'll find a range of things over here, but the W can be taken out about the same distance as this extra sliver on the left. You take it outward, so it goes beyond the box. And the slanted lines come and join at this line, again the intersection of the circle and the cross lines. So you get a very elegant W with this. And the same thing theoretically can be turned around for an M, but we can make the M slightly narrower. See, my center was not correct, so that's why my letters are leaning a little to the left. Okay, so we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. All done. I don't know why mine are not matching up. Okay, right. Now, when you have to, we are not going to be carving these letters, but if you have to carve these letters, say, and make them really beautiful looking, then you will make marks on your marble where all these are marked like this. So you will make a grid, you will mark the height of the letters, and in that you will mark the shape that you need, and the space between the letters can be about half of this, or actually even quarter of your square, and your word is done. So we are going to try one version of this where I want you to make a line, a baseline, and on this try writing your name. So start from the front. My name needs doesn't need the full square, but I will have to draw the full square. And then I draw only the space that the A needs. And then I leave about 1/4 of the distance between 1/4 of the width of the square between my first letter, which ends here, and the second letter. So the space between letters has to be just 1/4 of this. Now my letter, my name starts with an A, which is written in the second category, so it does not use up the whole square. If I use up the whole square and then leave half or 1/4 space of the square, which will be the inter letter space. Then my first letter might look like it's too far apart. The second letter does consume the whole square, so I'll write the second letter here, leave that interletter space, which should be about the same. Now the eye is a very small shape, so I will just draw half of the square, leave that interletter space, then draw category 2 space, which would be and I have to shift this entire thing to the left and then leave that quarter space. Do you see how it is not as easy as just making boxes and leaving spaces? With each letter, you have to decide on how much the space would be. So finally, this is what I will get. And once you have written this with this kind of spacing, balances, just the shapes, proportions of the letters, no chance your letters are not going to look good. Okay, I'm going to make my letters slightly thicker so we can study the balances. Okay, can you see the balance in this or in the names that you have written? Okay, so once you understand how letters and letter balances work, you can play around with this a little bit. So what can we do with our letter forms? We can take some of these shapes and we can create certain, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Once you know how much space is occupied by each of the letters, you can go by uh, this formula and create your own letters, which are just in these three different categories. And in that, I want to show you letters in which you can add a certain thickness to letters and make them look a certain way. So if you have a regular letter A like this, which is not fitting in a square, but not really just even a rectangle, it's slightly wide. What are the things that you can do to this letter? Okay, just observe what I'm doing, because if you are looking down and doing your own thing, you might miss out on a few things here. So I'm writing these three A's which are identical, and we are going to change how they look by just changing the thickness of a few lines in a certain manner. So this is our regular A. If we want to make it a Roman A, we will give it a serif, which is a line at the bottom, and the right side going down will become thick. The left also becomes thicker than before, but the right is almost 3 times thicker than that. And the same thickness that we have on the line on the left, it's about the same thickness for the crossbar. But the top remains a nice sharp edge. So this is one kind of A. Now here the thickness is even throughout the line, but we can change that. So if we convert this line to a line that looks like this, which starts off thick, then becomes thin along the way, and then becomes thick again. And then you have the same version on the left, on the right, but thicker, using that same proportion as the second letter we made. Make the right side 3 times thicker, and then convert this into a slit like this. This becomes a much more contemporary variation of a very standard letter. So this is how letters evolve. Both these letters can be written with a flat brush. So we will be doing lettering with a flat brush. But before that, I am going to share some letter forms with you, which I want you to draw in what's called monoline. So when you use a pencil or a pen which has just one thickness of line and you draw out these shapes, that is called monoline lettering. And monoline is very good for you to figure out what proportions you want your letters to be in. Now these are the letters which have got slants. What about letters which are upright? So you have the letter E, for example. I'm carefully making the E in a rectangle shape, so it's slightly thinner than the A. Here again we can make a curve like this. And maybe even a serif like this. Oh, I forgot to make this fellow. Sorry, I'll make that first. So the Roman letter for the E looks like so. The vertical line is slightly thinner in the E than the right-sided line on the A. Then you have, and this goes thick throughout, the same thickness throughout. Don't change that. Then you have the serif, and then the same thickness as the crossbar on the A. You will draw a horizontal line. Don't make it go too far. And a rounded corner on the serif. It's not a sharp corner. And the sharp corner comes on the outside of the serif for the E. And then of course right in the center you have the same thickness as the top crossbar, bottom crossbar. And a nice formal E. Translate that into this contemporary script, and you can get something like this. And now let's try an O. The O for Roman fills up an entire square. Now when this is translated in brush, here's how things change. This oval gets a thickness like this thin part here. On the top, slightly left, and the bottom slightly right. And then you have a curve that comes around like this. So it's not exactly sideways. And the reason for this weird thickness on just a weird angle like so is because this letter is, when written with a flat brush like this, we don't keep the brush on the horizontal. We don't make an oval shape like so. When writing these letters, the brush is kept at a shallow, like a 15-degree angle. So when I write the A, I write the A like this. So I get a little bit of thickness. And then on the right. And then the crossbar. So we are not going to do that right now. Maybe in the last class of this month, I might do a little demo of all these letter forms, just so you know. Now, of course, for this contemporary style, the same O can do. Okay, now let's try putting this to action. Suppose we want to write a sign for rose garden. we have two words. And we want to make a nice vintage sign out of it, for example. What are our options? So we can make just rose garden like this, or we can make a rose garden where the word rose is written on a curved space like this, and then you can write garden underneath. So it helps to know that all your letters can go into blocks. So if we were to write rose garden like this, we can just make a straight baseline, divide it. Now this time I want you to divide it from the center into the shape that you see. So O will get a big square, then some arbitrary shape on the left, and R will get maybe half of this square, more or less. I want you to be able to use all of this very precise data, but be able to make letters very easily. Don't get into the trying to make it too perfect, but do use some of the rules so that at least you're not totally off the mark. So I have given myself a half square, half square, half square, full square for the letters. This should be easy to write now. So when you make those marks in pencil, keep looking at those marks as you write the letters and keep modifying that space. So here I felt the space between S and E was a little less. I changed it. Now I'm going to make my letters thicker, and I'm also going to turn my S into circles like this. Maybe the top can remain flat, but the bottom definitely has to be a circle. I'm making my vertical line straight, giving a nice serif here, a serif at the front. And for the R, I would like to make it thick like this, just straight. I don't want that angle and whatnot. And here I will give a line that goes parallel, but then it ends like in a hairline. For the O, let's try making it like the traditional O. For the S, the thickness will come on the central straight section, and the top can have a nice serif like this, and actually why not the bottom as well. And in the same manner, we can write garden below this. Now the word garden has to sit perfectly from edge to edge. Now that we know how grids work, we are going to distribute the space mechanically, not visually. Now notice how the letters R and O use up so much more space than S and E. So if I were to drop a center to the word rose, it will not be between O and S. It will be somewhere over here. This is how I'm mechanically choosing the center. If I were to choose it visually, I would keep it between O and S, but then that will not be equal. Can you see this? This is often what happens with letters and words. Now you can divide the space around on both sides into 3 parts, so you will get a lot of space. Now you don't have to make very large letters, you can space them apart. Our G has to touch here, so we'll need a square right here. R will come in the middle like this, which will be a narrowish space. A will come here, narrowish space. Just check that your space in between letters is the same. D is a big fat square. And I don't go through all of this trouble. Like I won't measure that my E and R and everything has to be exactly like the Roman letters, but still they need to make some sense. So this is G, A. I'm making my R much wider than it should be. Also the E, because I don't want the N to look too wide. It is looking wide. Okay, are you getting this? Any questions so far? So in lettering, it is really the quote often spoken about art is very pertinent. First, understand the rules and then go ahead and break them. You're free to do whatever you want, but you should know that what rules you are bending. Then you can bend them well. All right, now if we have to convert this into a sign that's say like this, and maybe what we can change from rose garden, because I want a slightly longer word, let's make the words banana boat. Okay, another tip is even when you're writing the letters in rough, make sure you make them beautiful. You know, when someone often they look at my books and they say, oh, her rough work also looks so good. I've heard that. And not to toot my own horn, but I do pay attention to these little things. Am I leaving enough space from the margins? Are my letters sitting on one line? Or am I just scribbling them? All scribbles will definitely look like scribbles. But even a scribble, or what is intended to be a scribble, can look less messy. Right, now if we want to write the word banana boat in this form, you want to write the word banana and then we're going to write boat in the center. What do we do with the letters? So first thing, let's make our baseline. And this construction of these letters should often be seen like you would see an archway. So if you look at arches of bricks, you will notice that they are all sitting in this form. The bricks look straight. They don't look like they are tilted. The joints between the bricks are always perpendicular to the curve. This is how an arch sits. So our boxes should also sit like that. Now imagine if this arch were built out of bricks, you will see a gap between the bricks, which is often filled with some kind of cement or lime. The brick sits perpendicular. This is exactly how our letters should sit. Now that you know how the grid works. So break this in half. BAN will come on the left, A and A will come on the right. Now, let's try making our letters slightly upright. So, what we want to focus on is what is your curve here? And all you need to do is make a line on the curve at that point which is perpendicular to the curve. And you can make any number of lines. Just make sure that they are perpendicular. So cut out everything and see, check if your line looks like it's going straight through as if this were a straight line. Now what have I done? I have split this and made a line on the left, 3 lines on the left. So these are going to be my anchor points on which I'm going to write the letters banana. I've not made the boxes. So I can make my rectangle around this shape. So this is for the N. Leave a little space. This is for the A. And this is for the B. See, this box is a rectangle. And this is just like a brick, horizontal lines which make the shape of an arch. My letters from the right have come a little closer. Once we start seeing it like this, we can make our words. I'm going to just write this directly in ink so that I can see it nice and fat. So I don't distort my letters at all. I write them exactly as they should be written, even if they were on a straight line. And I don't change this now. My N has become a little weird looking, I think, but it should not. These two lines must be parallel. Oh, sorry, I'm off camera. And it's done. And exactly the same in the center. Now my B and A should have ended on the same point, but that's okay. Can you see? It's not, it's a little off. Just a little. So this is all you need to do. And you will start making much nicer looking letters and still make a whole lot of variations. All right. How is everyone's lettering looking? Let me change the view to gallery. Okay. Very nice. Good. Janita looking good. How do you like it? Very nice, Swati. Good. Okay, so give me some comments. Because I want to know what was new and what was different. How did you find your earlier letters, and then how did they change after we did the exercise of Roman letters?
Spacing is very important. The way you balance the top and the bottom word. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that spacing is that's what I learned. The main thing which I do now.
Okay, great. Just note it down right next to the letters there. Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, the
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Sai.
I think the proportion
yeah.
of one letter to the other, that was missing in my lettering earlier because uh, the whole concept that G and O will be bigger than A and like the now it's so much clearer. I mean,
Exactly.
even when writing normally, I think now
Yes.
I understand that better because I know that it's going to take up more space, which probably I don't know why we didn't think of it actually. It
No, we
was
are not. So we are taught a very functional hand. This is not something that we are taught unless we are doing lettering or typography. So as far as communicating is concerned, anyway you write, you communicate, it works. That's the problem. So that is why when you go from uh, go or you jump into art and start doing lettering, there are so many things you feel about why it's not working, and you just can't figure out. And then it's like you have been blindsided completely, that there is a whole set of simplified rules which if you only had known from day one, you would be able to understand lettering differently.
Aditya, I find that keeping the curve to keeping them into rectangles very difficult. Meaning making a rectangle on that curve very difficult.
So think of it like just stacking rectangles next to each other. So first is do you get a curve smoothly at all?
The
That is
curve
not a
comes.
problem.
That,
All right.
that is not a problem. The
All
curve
right.
is okay. It's
Then,
yeah.
so then all you need to do is look at all the lines radiating outward for a curve that is convex. And all the lines will just be radiating from the center of that
Yeah.
circle of which your curve is an arc.
Okay.
Now, when you draw those lines become the center of the letter. They do not become the edges of the the letter, the block. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So if I may just show you on this.
I understand now. I understand now how.
So what I drew first, these letters, these lines, they all came from the center and they were all radiating. But these are not the edges. Oh, sorry. So these are not the edges. Once I know where the letter is going to come, I make a horizontal line, an absolute horizontal line to 90 degrees. 90 degrees to this line.
Ah,
And
that
then I
yeah.
build my brick.
Okay. So now you've told me that the radiating is not the edge; it is
No.
the center of the letter, right?
Yes.
So that's the way to keep the rectangle to build the rectangle around it.
Yes, and that will then
Oh,
give
okay.
us the absolute location of each of the letters, and then those will be stacked next to each other, almost like our fingers, like this.
Okay. That's a good tip.
I
Yeah.
have a question.
Yes.
So, when we wrote boat or garden,
Uh-huh.
we sort of started from the middle, right? We divided the space from the middle, and then we wrote BO on one side and AT on the other,
Right.
right?
Right.
But B and O, especially O, takes more space than A and T in the
Hmm.
scheme that we
Right.
looked, right?
Yeah.
So then won't it be a little disbalanced? Or we just like sort of know that we have to make it even and expand it a bit.
Yeah, that is it. It's not as mathematical as you would like it to
Yeah.
be. And even the math includes all of these few variables that you have to keep in mind that if there is an O, and if you are going to make a very wide O, then you have to shift it a little to the right or the left or whatever. So this brings me to visual spacing also. There are some letters when they sit next to each other, they use up less space than other letters. Like if you have a D and an O next to each other, there's very little space. But an L and a T have a lot of space in between. So if you keep the exact same space between L and T and D and O, the L and T still feel like they're apart. So then we have to push them a little closer visually. There is no measure for this, just other than visually figuring out average space kaisi hai. So I find that the strangest thing that there is this is the word that is used is kerning, KERNING, and this is often done in graphic design when you're working with text. So, for example, in an ad, if you have a statement or you have some words written in a particular manner, and this is going to go on a billboard, you have to make sure that all the spacing or the kerning on that billboard looks perfect. It may, so there's two ways that the kerning is done. One is purely by measure. You will just take the distance between the two letters and mechanically place them, but that does not work. That's very artificial. So then there is a certain almost fuzzy learning that comes in, where you will take a few letters that come together differently visually, and they will always come together in the company of each other. But if they are next to another letter, they may not have to come that close or stay that far. So this is done deliberately and every time, just because we see spaces and letters differently. So in computer fonts, there are certain fonts which don't have this kerning. I'm trying to remember what the term is. I'll tell you how they look. If you use that font in your text, you will notice that everything looks like there is something weird. There isn't enough, there isn't equal space, although those letters have absolutely equal space. But then you take some of the older fonts. There are fonts like, you have Times New Roman, which was developed for the New York Times. Then you have an older font which is called a Garamond. There's a Castellon. Beautiful fonts which were designed visually. And these fonts were made so that when they are in the company of certain letters, they behave differently. Most letters which have a bowl, like the O, it doesn't even sit on the baseline. If you keep that letter on the baseline, because the O has curve at the bottom, somehow it seems like it's floating above. So all O's in fonts are just a little bit lower than baselines. They're like the belly is hanging a little below baseline, and only then it looks like they're sitting flat.
Fascinating. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, look it
Have
up.
to
It is
pay.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's what again, going back to what I was trying to say earlier, is that look at these as shapes and forms and putting them together to have fun with them. They don't necessarily always need to be um, perfect and perfect for reading, and also readable immediately. Allow for more fluidity in your strokes and play around with that as well. So as we go along, I'm going to show you some more options of those. I wanted to show you one more thing and then maybe we can end. So there's one very nice thing that I like to do, which is called a drop capital. So drop capital or drop caps are letters which are very large and are written, usually you would find them in storybooks or something, very decorative letters. I'll show you a few samples of drop caps from my books. So the intention over there was to create some kind of decoration on the paper, and the letters were made large so that you knew the start of what was happening on the page. Also, sometimes the letter was embedded in a picture. And I spoke with some librarians or also curators of these books, and asked them what was the whole point of all this. They said that many of these books were written in a time when literacy levels were very low. But there were enough books that were sent out to parishes, to churches, smaller churches, and there would be only one person who could read. But if he weren't around and you still wanted to have service, somebody would at least be able to read the book. They started putting in pictures. So if I were to show you a picture of a fox with a set of grapes, you would know what the story is about. You don't have to read the words to know the story. So what they figured was it's okay even if they tell the story. The words can be read by the by whoever when he comes back, but till then at least let the service carry on and people at least come there and learn something. That was the intent. So going back to now how to make the pages look decorative, this came to the calligraphers deciding, you know what, instead of wasting one whole page for an illustration, let us embed the illustration in the text, and then let's also put one of the letters of the text in the illustration, so that then all of that is connected, so then it doesn't look very different. And then also what happens if all the pages come loose, illustration will go in one place, story will go in one place, so let's just keep it all together. So there were a lot of practical considerations that went in. So drop caps can be just any kind of letter which is larger than the rest of the text. The term drop cap comes from dropped capitals, and by that it means the baseline is dropped. The baseline is the line on which all the letters are written. So if you have a chunk of text which has these kinds of baselines, and you have the letters starting from here, if you want to create a dropped cap, you will drop the baseline of the first letter several rungs down, and you'll probably bring it down to here because you want to increase the size of the letter, but you don't want it to go higher up on the page because you will never have space. And then you will start writing from here, so that this letter becomes part of this text. That is why it's dropped. The capitals, the baseline of the capital is dropped from there to here. And now this can be any form you want. So if very typical that you might have seen was probably in stories like Once Upon a Time. I won't write Once Upon a Time because O is a very boring letter to write. But suppose we write the letter, like if you want to write limericks or something. So you can write the letter T because many limericks start with T. So you can create your text block, give yourself the space that you need to write the T, and then give space for the rest of the limerick. And then you just make your T over here. But instead of writing just a boring old T like this, why not create a flourish? Just change that crossbar on top into a beautiful form like this. And now that you have this nice curve, why do you want to have a straight line? Why not convert that as well to a shape like so? And now here you start seeing problems. There will be somebody who says, oh my God, is it a T or is it a J or is it an L? Kya ho sakta hai? And then there will be one fellow who says, you know what, just forget it. Just make that same T, the simple T, forget, we don't want any confusion. But then there will be somebody who will say, okay, just hang on. What if I write the rest? And I can write there once was a whatever, and leave it for that person to figure it out. Will it be an L? No. Will it be a J? No. So what could it be? Just by a process of elimination, hopefully that fellow will figure out. Otherwise, he'll just miss the joke. Not a big deal. But if you keep it a simple T, it is a big deal. Forever, it is going to remain boring. So, one of few people not understanding your limerick is a price you should be willing to pay just so that your letters remain beautiful. Now that you have a form like this, you can decorate it further by giving it more embellishments and ornamentation. And then in this, you can write more things. Oh, sorry, you can make more shapes. So there is a method to flourishing as well, and I will teach you some of it in the next few classes, or at least an introduction to this, so that you don't land up making shapes like these. I'm going to make something similar, but you will know that somehow that is not working. This is a similar T to this, but this is not working because it is not built with a few of the I guess balances that you will see in the original T. So you don't really need to make this kind of a flourish T. Even if you make a T like this, that is fine. Whichever letter you make, you can surround that with lots of decorations. So you can make it thick. You can give it some pretty shapes like these, and again all these shapes can be searched on the net. Look for vintage letters. Even in some vintage letters you will find some really tacky samples. Don't go for those. And this itself can also be, this can be an emblem, this can be a logo, this can be a drop cap, anything. So what you should do is experiment. Try different tools. Try sketch pens, markers, nibs if you have those, different kinds of inks. You can also try like sticks and straws and whatever is handy. You need only three things for lettering. You need a surface on which to write, a tool with which to write, and any kind of pigment that can stain your surface. So you can write with coffee, you can write with dirt, you can write with your jhadu, or even like old pieces of card. Just dip it in ink and try making marks on newspaper. And even like on wet glass, you can do that. You can take a flat brush, make some soap or something, or write on glass and then wash it off. So there are lots of ways to practice this. It's getting hot. If it's getting hot outside, and if you've got like a tile surface, take a flat brush and water and just go try writing letters on that and let the water evaporate. You don't have to save everything, but you can practice a lot with your hand. Okay?
Aditi, I wanted to ask, sorry, going back to that wretched art.